Hey there, G3XE here with another Dungeon Workshop. Today is, I think a lot about games, game design, RPGs, in general. I'm by no means an expert at all. By no means really any sort of important voice, but I just thought we would go, blank canvas, throwing things at the wall, see what sticks. No judgment, just spitballing type of brainstorming about RPG experimental ideas and the future of RPGs and games and where they're going. I find these kind of topics very, very interesting. And one that I've been thinking about a lot is gateway games. So if you look at my channel, you can tell that not only do I post Dungeon Workshop videos about RPGs and D&D specifically, but I also enjoy war games, and I like Warhammer 40k and Age of Sigmar and stuff. So coming from that background, gateway games are fairly people know what those are, which are games that are half miniatures games that get you into the miniature gaming hobby, and allow a wider group of audience members community members who wouldn't have gotten into the hobby before that gateway game to enter in. A great example is Star Wars X-Wing, which is recently, just rocketed off, no pun intended, in popularity. And you don't have to paint those models. The rules are fairly simple, but they're very, very fun. And they get people into the idea of, okay, there is no board with spaces. This is a miniatures game where, we're trying to accurately, as best we can, model on the actual table what this scenario would look like in real space, right? You're taking away one level of abstraction in order to give you a little bit more of a simulation feeling with war games. It's very similar to what RPGs do in terms of story. Like there is a board technically, but there doesn't have to be. The board's in our mind, and we're trying to get away from the idea of Monopoly. I roll, okay, pass go, collect $200. We're trying to get into story. So gateway games bridge different groups of games. One of the types of gateway games that I was thinking about, I couldn't come up with any good examples because maybe it's a crazy idea and would never work. But there's a huge Magic the Gathering community. Magic, if you don't know, is a collectible trading card game. You build decks that have cards that are differing levels of rarity, and the cards do certain effects in the game, and then it rewards players who build very synergistic, if that's a word, decks that work with, like, where each card works together, where the odds of you drawing a hand of cards that will give you a powerful play in the game is high. Decks that have a low chance of anything powerful happening usually lose. So it's an interesting level of deck building, right? You do outside of the game, and then playing where there's odds happening, so it's a little bit of poker, and then there's also cool fantasy type, like stuff on the cards. Magic the Gathering is hugely popular and is probably, if I haven't looked at the exact numbers, but I would guess that it has the most players out of any nerdy hobby type game. So while board games are making a resurgence, while RPGs are growing, which is awesome, and war games, you could argue, are also growing, even though they're a niche of a niche, as Vince Venturella often says on his show Warhammer Weekly. Magic is the easiest to get into and probably has the most people. A gateway game that bridges Magic type stuff with RPGs. So how would that work? I was just thinking about it, and I was like, well, you don't. So first of all, no dice, as in a game like this needs a randomizing element, but that's what the deck of cards is for. So you wouldn't need dice. So how would that work? Well, most trading card games and stuff, they have like a resource type card and then the action type card. So in Magic, you have a land or mana, right, which powers the other cards, and it's always about how much should I put in my deck. You want to get a lot of mana, and you want to play good cards. So the way I'm envisioning it is, like, how the base thing would work is there would be resource cards like energy, strength or might or something, magic. You could have divine power or something, blessing. A whole bunch of different types of energy, and you put as much of those in your deck as you want. Then when it's your turn, you maybe in a similar way to Magic or some other different mechanic, you use those type of cards to pay for action cards, which would be things, if we were thinking in a typical D&D thing, like your class abilities and your powers. So, Barbarian Rage, that would be a common card. Now, where this would get interesting is that you would sell the cards in packs that are rare, that have different levels of rarity. So there would also be item cards, right? And you give the item cards essentially to your Dungeon Master. So there's still a Dungeon Master. And then whenever, or maybe, you give them to him and he shuffles them and there's a big pile of them on the table or something. But I don't really know how that would work specifically. But whenever you got loot, you would draw, right? Or maybe you would just be in your deck, but you would just draw. But how it would work out so that a rare item in the game, a rare magical sword, would also be a rare card in real life. And this bridges, so with most gateway games, it loses something from both sides. So it would have to lose the competitive kind of like win at all cost attitude from Magic, which in my mind would be a good thing. But it would also have to lose some role-play-ness from RPGs. But that's fine because it's a gateway game. I was thinking it's meant to get people who don't think of themselves as like role players and wouldn't be comfortable playing a game of D&D without having a friend bring them into it and show them that it's not what they imagine. This would do that, right? So you would say, oh, I get to buy cards, and you make a character. Your deck would be your character. And that would be familiar territory. But then you might be asked by a Dungeon Master to explain what you're doing as you do it, and it would kind of enter people into role-playing. Now, this would by no means be a role-playing game straight up, because there would be deck building and there would be different rarity cards, and so I definitely get that it's a different animal, but I just thought it would be an interesting idea. The other cool thing is that when you're building characters, it would be very similar to building a deck, and you would have very customizable options, right? So there wouldn't be classes. There would just be abilities, right? And the ability would cost something. So let's say Barbarian Rage, or maybe it wouldn't be called Barbarian Rage, maybe Barbaric Rage. And Barbaric Rage costs 2 might or strength or something, and 1 energy, right? Well, let's say you are playing a wizard, and you have bunches of spells in your deck. You don't want to, but you want to add in this rage. You would have to figure out a way to balance that, because might and energy are not going to be resources that a wizard type character would use all that often. But maybe, let's say, if you're a paladin, but you already have those might and maybe divine magic cards. Maybe you slip in some energy or whatever, and then that way you can add in Barbaric Rage to your repertoire of abilities and skills and different cards, right? And obviously more powerful abilities would require greater amounts of energy, and so on. I think this would work best with one-shots, right? So you come with your character ready, and then the Dungeon Master has a series of encounters and an adventure kind of prepped, I guess, or at least like a web type of adventure where it's like you start out here and then there are different decisions you can make that end in different things, right? But and then when it gets to combat, it would be very much like cards and stuff. Then how monsters would work and stuff like that, I was thinking that in the little packs you would buy, maybe like starter packs would have a DM starter pack and then player starter packs. But then in the individual like little packs of cards you would buy, it would always come with one DM card at the end. And then a bunch of player option cards. And then the DM cards are things like Goblin or Trap or, stuff like that. Again, uncharted territory. Don't know how it would work. But I like sometimes just putting all our reasons why not aside to just let your imagination run wild. And to think about, well, why don't we fuse these two types of games? Or because you think of trading card games with a competitive bent and role-playing games, while they're both in the realm of nerdiness, vastly different. But would be very interesting, especially if you went to the counter and said, oh, could I get a pack of those cards? Yeah. You open it and you're like, whoa, I found the sword of blah, blah, blah. Like, this is so awesome. I can't wait to put this in my character so that he can grab it, and then I can use it with him. And it would kind of get people to start be interested in role-playing games because they can start thinking of their deck not as just their ability to find the best cards that match with each other, but their ability to find cards that can match with each other and how that makes a character, right? So, I don't know. Gateway games, using a deck of cards as a character. Tell me your ideas, your thoughts. And if you want to see more of these crazy, off-the-wall type ideas, but thanks. Have a good one.